Welcome back to the class on international business communication. Today we will be talking about how technology plays a part in communication in international business. How do we communicate using technology? What are the effects of the use of technology in the international business arena, in international business communication specifically? And how we can expand this realm. I mean, that is something that I would like you to think about. What affects the use of technology in international business communication, and so on and so forth. So before we move on, we will have a revision again. IBC stands for International Business Communication. Revision: compare and contrast verbal, non-verbal, written and oral forms of communication. Now we are at a stage where I would really like you to see these differences. Please figure out what these differences are. You should know what is verbal communication, what is oral communication, what is non-verbal communication, what is written communication, and today we'll talk about digital communication. So you should know the differences, you should know the effects of communication, you should know the effects of either of these or each of these media on the interpretation, the designing and interpretation of messages, and so on. So you should know these basics. Discuss the applicability of the above in the international business arena. I would like you to figure out how each of these can be used. Where would they be used? Where would you use written communication? Where would you use oral communication? Again, I told you last time, I'm telling you again, this course is not about prescriptions. I would like you, the people listening to these things, to come up with your own prescriptions. Please come up with 10 steps to effective written communication. Please come up with 20 steps to effective non-verbal communication. Please come up with 15 steps to effective oral communication. That is something that I want you to figure out on your own based on what you hear in this class, and based on the links that are brought to your or suggested to you. You can take these links and search some more, and I would like you to figure these things out on your own. And I had noticed a very interesting snapshot on Facebook. I don't think I have the authority to put it up here, so I'm not going to do so, but it was just a slide where this person had said that what we study in class is we are taught in class that 2 plus 3 is 5. In the examination we are asked what is 239 multiplied by 569, and in a class test that is what we are asked, and in the examination what we are asked to compute is the mass of the sun, and that is pretty much what I'm trying to do here. It is not, I'm giving you all the tools. Now you figure out how these tools can be applied. There's a reason for this. It is not to offload what we do here on you. The reason for this is to help you start thinking more critically about whatever we learn, to start using to start applying the basic concepts to daily lives, because we cannot cover the entire gamut of situations. Now, digital communication is a relatively newer phenomenon as compared to written communication or oral communication. It is a form of written communication, but there are some aspects of orality also in the digital communication. And that is pretty much what we will discuss today. How do these things play a part in determining how people feel about digital communication? I would like you to also discuss the implications of the use of the above forms of communication in isolation and in combination with each other. When would you use written communication on its own? When would you combine it with oral communication? When would you be able to combine written, oral and non-verbal communication in some place? Where, when, what would the impact be? Please discover these things for yourselves, and you'll learn a lot more. After you have done that, let's move on to technology, digital communication. Now, we will talk about digital communication. Digitality is a form of technology. So, before we talk about digitality, we should have some philosophical understanding about what technology is. Okay. According to the Encyclopedia of Science, Technology and Ethics, technology may be broadly defined as the making and using of artifacts. In its simplest forms, however, use will involve no more than natural objects, and in more abstract instances, fabrication and use can both be concepts. Again, there is a debate going on whether technology is only artifacts or the use can also be considered as technology, and the use depends on my favorite word here, context. How do you use something? How does that use impact how you think about technology or any other artifact will be determined by context, and context will further feed into what you think about the technology and how you use it, what you see in it, what do you think of value in it. Technological innovations, the actual use of technological innovations may vary from the intended use. An example of this is the radio or the television. Initially, the radio and television were forms of mass information. They were designed to convey information en masse to people, and then people realized that why only information, why not some entertainment, why not education. Initially when TV started, it was news, most of it was news. I remember those times. I was a kid and Himachal Pradesh had just started using television. It was in the 70s, and we had just got started watching TV in Himachal. The relay used to be from Jalandhar TV, if I am not mistaken, and there was one receptor in Shimla that used to transmit it to selected places in Himachal. And some programs initially were, most important programs were news in English, Hindi and Punjabi, because it was coming from Punjab, and then we had some sports events, but it was pretty much that, maybe one weekly movie, and we used to have Chitrahar, which I am not sure if Doordarshan still broadcasts that or not. It was a medley of songs, and maybe one quiz program. Then slowly things started creeping in. We started having quiz programs, we started having foreign programs were also shown. One of the earliest programs was, I think, Mind Your Language and Telematch. Telematch was a German program. There are many variations available of that, but if you Google it, you will see it. So it was mainly to stimulate your senses. Hardcore entertainment was never a part of the television, at least when it started. This is from personal experience. I'm sure research has indicated otherwise. But people who are in the same age group as me, or who are somehow, who've seen all this happening, will be able to relate to it. Then people started realizing that these forms of mass communication can also be used for education. So the one thing that parents never prevented their children from watching was the UGC program. It was broadcast daily, I think at 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. in the morning, and at 3 or 4 p.m. And I remember coming back from school and sitting glued to the television. These were things we were not being taught in school, but this is something that we could learn from there. We used to have the science quiz, and old days black and white televisions used to be there. Color transmission had not yet started. We used to have a science quiz. So people started thinking that this form of mass communication can also be used for education, in addition to giving people the news about various events that they did not have access to through newspapers. And they realized that this kind of technology would bring them news faster. What you saw in the newspaper the next day was brought to you via national news the previous night. So you were a step ahead. And having experienced these things, we saw the advent of the internet. We were pre-internet teenagers and pre-internet adolescents and pre-internet young adults. And we saw how this changed our lives completely. Now, similar things happened. Similar things can be applied to the newer forms of technology, specifically communicative technologies like blogs, for example, or teleconferencing, or what is happening here. This particular event, this recording is happening in sometime in the late say 2010 to 2012 time frame. Now, who knows how long this will be saved? Who knows how long this will be available? This could be available even 100 years from now as an old archived piece of information if there is some value to it. Or this could be deleted as soon as people listen to it. So things have changed. People realized that the internet was there for information, and then the internet started coming up for entertainment and for people to connect with each other. Internet stands for International Network, if I am not mistaken. And so it's a network of people who are sharing what they know, people are communicating with each other, and then with the positives also came the negatives. So it's really about, when you design a technology, you don't know how all consuming it can be. And many philosophers, including one who I've referred to quite a bit, was Martin Heidegger, who said that you design a technology for your use, but eventually it ends up consuming you, because you have to really keep a tab on how you use technology. Okay. Technology and context, as we've already established, how we use technology depends on context, and then the use of technology, we are pushed into a position, we use technology for something else than it has been intended for, and then slowly it takes over and we sort of give a different meaning to it. One technology that has now died is Google Wave. It started, people said that it will be probably replace Facebook. But what happened was that Google Wave started, but Facebook was so strong, and a lot of things that were on Google Wave were also available on Facebook. People, they started competing with each other. So eventually the whole concept, even though it was very good, somehow it did not offer anything additional. It did not offer the additional benefit of getting people, of helping people stay in touch with each other. Now that is an example of technology dying because of lack of creative use. People could have used it, but there was so much available. I tried it in one of my classrooms where we got people to start talking. The biggest problem was the load on the server. We couldn't keep up with it. I wanted all my students to participate. In a class of 100 students, I made groups. Even though we had only 10 groups, it was hard to have people participate in the discussion because of the load it put on the server. So that is one reason why I stopped using it. There could be other people who are doing different things also, but depending on the ease of use of technology, again in international business, I'll bring it back to what we are really discussing here. It is international business. In the international business arena, what technology does is something that no one can imagine, something that no one can predict. And I'm going to give you all these inputs. I'm sorry, I'm really very, very passionate about this subject, so I may have strayed from the main topic, but then you will become as passionate too after you've gone through this lecture, I hope. Okay. Communication technology can be of two types. It could be communication assisted or facilitated by technology. Let's think of some examples. Maybe the voicemail could be a form of communication that is assisted or facilitated by technology. Technology doesn't alter the communication as such, it just helps store the form of communication. It would just be sort of, it acts as a storage device. That is communication assisted or facilitated by technology. Communication that is mediated by technology, where technology itself acts as a liaison between the sender and receiver of the message. These are the two categories that I thought we could apply to the communication technologies, especially in the workplace. Some examples of this, of computer mediated or communication mediated by technology, could be the discussion groups, could be decision making that is offloaded to the computer. So you feed in the data, the computer gives you some responses, you use those responses and make your decisions. So what happens is that what you put in is in your control, but what comes out is not in your control. Similarly, with discussion groups, you say your part, but how the other people respond and how that ties in with what you have said, where are the hyperlinks generated, how they are generated, all that is not determined by you. Somehow this computer is playing a part, and you say, well, it is all human beings. Yes, we feed in information, but then how that information is tagged and how it links up with relevant things is again managed by a supercomputer outside of this one, and that is where we say that the computer becomes a medium of transmission. It could be a storage device also, it could become a medium of transmission, it could be a different source of information as well. sounds mind-boggling. We'll come to it in a bit. Communication technologies in international business. Right now, in the year 2011-12, what is really happening is the technologies in international business that are being used today are: one, voicemail is an integral part of any business. You have emails. All business happens pretty much over emails, very few face-to-face interactions, very few papers. Teleconferencing is another one. We have compressed videos, we have computer assisted decision making, we have blogs and personal websites, we have discussion groups, we have online communities and virtual reality. You have a second life. Again, I think there's a website called secondlife.com. So you can create a different identity, you can create multiple identities, and people can be communicating through those, and you can add as many as you like to this particular set. Now, I'll give you an example. One thing that this does is that it somehow immortalizes the sender of the message. And it's a sad phenomenon, and I have not put it on the slides. If you're using something like Facebook, you will realize that a lot of times people who have passed on still have their profiles up. Obviously, people don't share their passwords with others unless it's an emergency. So those people, the profiles of people who have passed on are still available on Facebook, which means that they have somehow become immortalized. And if they have shared their passwords with their near and dear ones, maybe some people want to keep these souls alive through their identities on the internet. And by the time that this video is broadcast and shared, and who knows, maybe 10, 15, 20, 50 years down the line, this will become our reality, a means of immortalizing ourselves, a means of storing records. So it's not really oral or written. In the previous lectures, we said that written communication helps you store records. But at this point, we are also realizing that internet communication through technology can also become a very valuable storage arena for records. It immortalizes you, and the space required isn't very much. And thanks to all our scientists who are working day and night to develop these technologies, the manner of storage is not as difficult. You don't have buildings full of old files that are prone to fire and all that stuff, or termites, and it's very easy to retrieve. It's relatively, may not be very easy, but it's relatively easier to retrieve all this information. So what you say, what you do throughout your life is in a way immortalized through the use of technology. Scary, but also, it has both positives and negatives. And if we get into this discussion, it will take up maybe 15 more lectures. Computer mediated communication, let's come to that, because computer assisted communication is primarily storage, so not very much going on there. But when we start mediating our communication through the computers, I'm going to stick to only one thing today, computers, then let's see what happens. Some assumptions we make about computer mediated communication. CMC is an internationally recognized abbreviation for computer mediated communication. Okay, this is from a paper by Cullinan and Marcus, quoted in Walther 2010. Communication mediated by technology filters out many cues found in face-to-face interaction, one of the assumptions. Different media filter out or transmit different cues. Substituting technology mediated for face-to-face communication will result in predictable changes in intrapersonal and interpersonal variables. I'll discuss this. If I start getting down to it, I will not be able to cover anything. But just keep this in mind, that computer mediated communication will have an impact on how we think about situations, how those situations in turn affect how we deal with other people in the environment. Some criteria for selection of computer mediated communication. One is the lack of non-verbal cues. Now we know that there are no non-verbal cues, and knowing this fully well, we still choose to use the computer mediated communication. Some of the aspects here are: one is social presence. Social presence is the degree of sociability present in the use of the media, how visible you are, how people view you in the business environment, in your social environment or socio-professional environment, if we want to take professional environment as a subset of social environment, how people view you there, how much of presence you have, how much of impact you are having. So that again depends on the lack of non-verbal cues. Again, that impacts this. It also impacts media richness, which is the degree of formality and structure in the language, the variety of language, the kinds of words you use, the tone you use, and the facial expressions if applicable, or smileys. That also adds to it. Now time, the speed of feedback has been a part of media richness. I have put it under a separate heading here because I feel that this is a very, very important criterion for selecting which kind of technology you will use for your communication. And again, this depends on the availability. Again, next point here is accessibility. Who has access to a particular form of technology? Maybe 10 years ago, very few people had access to a telephone. Cell phone was a luxury. These days, cell phone is a necessity. In IIT Kharagpur, very poor areas, you know, people with living in very, very poor conditions live within and outside the campus. People don't have don't have that much money to spend on luxuries, but we see the rickshaw walas on campus carrying cell phones. So if they wanted, they could engage in business with anyone sitting in any part of the world, because these programs, these, you know, the ability to communicate with somebody is so much these days, it has become a necessity. The accessibility of a cell phone is much higher than the accessibility of an internet connection. So if somebody sitting in some other part of the world, if a rickshaw puller in say London wanted to communicate with a rickshaw puller in Kharagpur or in Midnapur, they could do so via phone. They don't need anything else, and it won't cost that much. They will be able to probably afford it. It's easier. Position in hierarchy is another criterion that will depend on how comfortable your higher ups feel with the technology you use. Maybe they prefer paper-based communication, maybe they prefer face-to-face communication, maybe they prefer email. That will depend on where you are. Contingency theory is the degree of equivocality, which is the degree to which decision-making situation and information related to it are subject to multiple interpretations, or the uncertainty in a situation, the need for quick feedback, and the personalness of the source could be better predictors of the contingency theory. So how uncertain is it to interpret what was intended? That is the contingency theory, and that in turn determines what technology we use. An email with smileys will somehow convey both verbal and non-verbal expressions, and again there's a whole bunch of research that tells you that you shouldn't capitalize, because capitalization in email amounts to shouting. And so, you know, how you the font you pick, the color of the font, the background that you pick shows people what you're thinking and where you're coming from. And again, if we get into it, it will just be, you know, spread over 10 lectures. Some more criteria: the degree of anonymity desired by the participants, how invisible they want to be is another factor. Possibility of anonymity, pseudonymity, or nominal identification. Again, some people want to be invisible, some people don't, depending on what they are doing. They may even want to be deceptive. Pseudonymity is portraying yourself to be somebody else. You want to have an online presence, you don't want to declare who you are, so you come up with a separate identity and you go with a pseudonym. I want to be known, but I don't want the real me to be known. I want only this aspect of me to be known. So there is social presence, but the name you're using is different. Or nominal identification, you have some little bit of presence, but again depending on how you want to portray it. It's selective identification. Asynchronous composition of messages and varying time intervals before interactive replies appear. Again, how you structure your messages, where do you want which kind of reply, you know, again this comes in the realm of strategic communication, how you shape your messages, what is transmitted when. It is not in real time. You send out one part of the message at one point and then you come up with it and say that's not all. You get the person interested and you say that's not all. That is an example of asynchronous composition of messages. You get a person hooked on. We had discussed this in persuasion. Size of audience is another one. How many people do you want to reach? If it's a phone call, it's very unlikely that you will be able to leave voicemails for 50 people. It may become possible by the time this message is this video is transmitted. Today it is not possible to leave the same voicemail on 50 machines, but it may become possible and it may become very easily available. So if it's one-to-one messaging, you leave a voicemail. If it is a personal message, you vary the tone and pitch. If it is a mass thing, you leave an email, or you put it on the bulletin board if you're not expecting a response, and all those things determine what you pick. The ability to lurk for answers without uttering a request. Now, many websites show you whether what you have posted or whether what you have sent has been read or not. So what do? You keep visiting that site. And what we don't realize is that many people can see how many times their site has been visited, how many times this has been seen, and by whom. And then they will realize, oh well, so and so is looking for an answer, let me hold back. Could be a manipulative technique, could also give the other person a sense of urgency. Okay. Factors affecting the effectiveness of computer mediated communication. Now, lack of non-verbal cues can also be a factor that affects the effectiveness of computer mediated communication. In lack of non-verbal cues, we have something called as the social presence theory, which means that many communication media differ in their capacity to transmit classes of non-verbal communication in addition to verbal content. So the fewer the cues that are transmitted, the less warm and personal the message is perceived to be. Again, this is based on a research by Hirtz, Johnson and Agel in 1978. Things could be different today. But again, this has been, you know, people have been going back and forth and saying whether technology isolates or brings people together. Again, people feel that depending on the choice of words, the amount of personal tone in a message, people either feel involved with somebody or they feel dissociated from somebody. The next one is media richness theory. Again, communication media that support multiple verbal and non-verbal cue systems make up the richness of the medium that is being used. The number of cue systems supported by the medium adds to the richness of the medium. Immediacy of feedback provided by the medium also adds to the richness of the medium. Unidirectional to asynchronously bidirectional to simultaneously bidirectional. Sounds like big words. Unidirectional, you post a message, you're not expecting a response. One-sided. Asynchronously bidirectional is send an email, wait for the response. The response may come in 1 hour, it may come back in 1 month, it may come back in 1 year. So you space out. Simultaneously bidirectional is excuse me, the chat messages. You constantly, it's almost like talking. So you're immediately getting a response, shaping your next response, and if you delay things, then people feel that something is wrong. Potential for natural language, again, that also contributes to media richness. Now, when we talk about natural language, again, there's a whole body of research that covers natural language, but that adds to the richness of the media, the potential of any medium to help the users communicate in their natural language, along with its faults and flaws and imperfections, is called the media richness theory. It sort of adds to the media richness. Message personalization, again, you could personalize the background, you could add things, you could add different cues to it. So the possibility, the availability of personalization tools, the availability of tools that can make your language as sound as human as possible. You could add all these different kinds of add-ons to your message, contributes to the richness of the media. And the time again depends on how you structure your message. People could perceive it as personal or impersonal or formal, etc. Okay. Social identity model of de-individuation, the loss of awareness with regards to one's own and others' individuality effects. This is called the SIDE model, social identity model of de-individuation. What do we mean by this? We are essentially talking about the identity. Is my identity in my hands or is it constructed socially? Visual anonymity deters interpersonal communication due to problems with establishment of familiarity through visual cues. You don't know who's on the other end, there is no familiarity, you don't know how the person will respond, so people feel that there is a gap. How do I know you? I don't know you enough to give you this information, I don't know you enough to share this piece of information with you, I don't know you enough to establish this professional connection with you. This happens in a lot of the international teams where one person in the team is placed on one continent and the other person is placed on another continent. How do I establish trust? How do I want to put you in a frame. You are a committed individual. You're sitting in India. Your boss is sitting in China. Boss's boss is sitting in the US. Boss's boss's boss is sitting in Brazil. How do you connect? Yes, you can communicate through technology, but which frame? How, when you start writing their report, when you start assessing their performance, how do you do it? You don't know who's at the other end. How do you talk freely to these people, and how do you come up with a mutually acceptable solution to problems? Okay. Orientation of CMC users to others on the basis of group dynamics rather than individual characteristics. So what we do is we are unable to see people's individual characteristics. So what do? We start attributing these traits to them based on how they behave in the groups. Teleconferencing, somebody is aggressive, somebody is not. So you say, okay, so and so can get things done, because even though people are sitting on different continents, the person could be a wimp in real life, but since the person has been able to get things done through an online conference, through an online chat, through an online community room, we start attributing these traits to the person. So it's basically, it is exclusively based on the person's behavior in group dynamic situations. Okay, signaling theory is another one. Why certain signals are reliable and others are not. The costs of deceptively producing the signal must outweigh the benefit. Again, different kinds of signals give us an idea of the manner in which this technology is perceived and how we treat this technology. Do we treat a piece of technology as reliable or not? We have two kinds of signals. One is the assessment signals and the other one is the conventional signals. Assessment signals are where we attribute the traits of the group the person belongs to the person himself or herself. I'll give you an example. Maybe a company is known for its humane behavior or its creativity. So we'll say that since this company has a reputation for being a very, very creative organization, everybody in this organization must be thinking out of the box. Why? Because we've not had a chance to interact with people. We are just looking for signals to assess these people. We cannot possibly go and visit the organization and meet everybody. We are just interacting with them. They are always using the company line. So we say that based on what we've heard from them, we assume that I've had interaction with 20 people from this organization, everybody is saying the same thing. So this means that the whole company and the company has a reputation. So even the other 820 people are just as creative and just as professional as these 20 people I have interacted with. Conventional signals are, they bear socially determined relationship with their reference. Their verbal claims and self-descriptions may or may not be trustworthy. One example of this is a person's resume and what a person puts up on their website. I am so and so, I have done so and so. In the academic arena, we put up lists of our publications, people can go and verify it. That's one side of it. Many times people can't go and verify what you've put up on your resume till they actually pick up the phone and call up those people. And usually people will not mention negative things on their resumes. So it can be verified, but it's hard to verify these things. These are the conventional signals. And again, we depend on these signals to perceive to make connections between people sitting in different areas, especially people who we are connected with only through technology. Okay, experience and perception is another one, and here we have the electronic propinquity theory. This deals with the psychological closeness experienced by communicators, which is in turn affected by the capacity of a channel to convey multiple cue systems. You may be there, you may have the system, but the bandwidth eventually determines what you can and cannot send out. And I just gave you an example. Google Wave, in my personal case, failed in my classroom because the bandwidth could not handle the load of even 10 computers working simultaneously. Mutual directionality, immediacy of feedback, how immediately, how soon, how simultaneous, the degree of simultaneity, if there's a word like that, with which you get your feedback, in turn impacts how close people feel to each other when they are being connected through electronic communication media. Level of complexity of the task, again how closely they are working on solving a complex task, and the level of complexity where they are constantly interdependent. Communication rules, again another one, big thing. How do communication rules determine how close you feel to people? I'll leave this for you. This is something that you should be able to figure out on your own by now. Choices among alternative media. If it's chat, if I'm not able to get something done through chat, would I be able to get it done through some other channel? If I have more choices, I may not feel committed to use the medium that I have to its full capacity. On the other hand, if the medium I'm using is the only one I have, or is one of the fewer media I have, then I will be more committed to putting in my heart and soul and exploring everything, its full utility, and maybe coming out with a more effective response, and maybe feeling close with people in dealing with these complex problems here of using the medium to its full capacity. All of these things are interrelated. Okay. Experience and perception is another factor that determines how we view technology. Social influence theory, factors that change users' perceptions about the capacities of computer mediated communication and their consequent uses of the medium. How we determine what technology is going to be influential, what is not, depends on what we see or what we perceive from our environment. Nature of media and their potentials are socially constructed, and the richness and utility of a medium are affected by dynamic interaction with other individuals or social network. People around us are telling us this can be used in this way and this way and this way. I have used it effectively, why don't you? And we see this and we get influenced, and that in turn determines whether we decide to use a particular technology or not, and how effective that technology becomes, because more and more people are working towards using it to its full capacity. Channel expansion theory, as individuals gain more experience with a particular communication medium and an interaction partner, the medium and that interaction partner become richer for them. So we would, whatever we do, if we are constantly using it, practice is coming in, different people are coming in, we become closer, we start using the medium more effectively, and we start thinking that the medium is really more effective than we thought it to be earlier. Okay. Interpersonal adaptation and exploitation of media. Social information processing theory. In the absence of non-verbal cues, communicators adapt their interpersonal communication to whatever cues remain available through the channel that they are using. And so we tend to adapt to a medium, especially when that medium is the only one available to us, and that in turn influences how we start using that medium. So we say that since I've already figured out how to use this medium to its full capacity, why should I not continue using this and not really use the others as much? And the other one is impression and relationship management through CMC requires a longer time than through face-to-face communication. Now again, this is social information. One is the use. I become more comfortable, but it takes me a longer time and it's more difficult for me to establish an impression and maintain that impression in my social arena. Public image, when we say impression, we are essentially talking about our public image and social identity, and that in turn is influenced that in turn influences how effective we perceive a medium to be. Okay. One more aspect here is hyper-personal communication, computer-mediated communication. It proposes to explain how CMC may affect cognitive and communication processes related to message construction and reception. So, how does CMC affect cognition and communication processes? The first one is effects due to receiver processes. One is idealization. What do I do when I get all this information from different places? What do? I say, okay, this is missing, and since 60% of the information points in this direction, I'll fill in the gaps and I will assume that the whole message should be interpreted in such a way. It's all positive. Effects among message senders: selective self-preservation, impression management, and transmission of desirable cues. I give you selective information about myself, and so that becomes a factor in helping me choose which technology I should use and which technology I shouldn't use. Wherever there's a higher possibility of me presenting myself selectively and selective interpretations, I will use a technology that allows me to construct this alternative identity as well as possible or easily. Attributes of the channel: creation of desirable messages, management of time to respond, leads to transmission of reduces the need for entertainment. So what happens is that I create the desirable messages, I manage the time to respond, so I don't really need to sort of look for other things and enjoy the interaction. I get to the point as fast as possible and I'm done with it, and the channel in turn helps me do it, and I select a channel that helps me get to the point much faster without all this alternative noise in the background. Feedback effects are social construction of the notion of the ideal sender and receiver through idealized and selective message sending, receiving, and interpretation. It feeds into itself and alters the behavior of the sender and receiver suitably. I portray an image of myself, people start expecting things associated with that portrayed image. Their feedback to me is dependent on what they think of me at that point, and depending on that feedback, when I get that feedback from them, I start responding appropriately and my behavior changes. I portray myself selectively. Based on that selective portrayal, their feedback comes in, which is feedback to this alternate identity I have created. When this identity is fed, it grows and it envelops me, and I become that alternate person. I may not have been that alternate person, but I become that alternate person because of this constant going in and coming out of messages, constant exchange of messages. So it could change you for better, it could change you for the worse, it could affect the way organizations are perceived. International business, you could be perceived as adaptable, you could be perceived as not adaptable, very strict, very stringent, and again, you know, it has so many implications. I want you to figure those out on your own. Warranting is perceived legitimacy and validity of information about another person that one may receive or observe online. Efficiency framework is it is warranting is the legitimacy and validity of the information about the person that one may think about online. Is this person legitimate? Is this person right? Is this person ethical? Should I believe this person? Should I not believe this person? All of those things. Efficiency framework is text-based communication, which may not be as satisfying as video-mediated or face-to-face communication as text-based communication, because it requires more effort. Now, what happens is that text-based communication requires a lot more effort to transmit the non-verbal cues, whereas in a video-mediated or face-to-face communication, you say something, it is supplemented with all these non-verbal cues, so the effort required to transmit the message is much lesser. The effort required to convey the intended meaning is much lesser in video-mediated or face-to-face communication, and that in turn impacts what kind of medium we choose. Okay. ICT succession, information and communication technology succession, Repetition of a message through two different types of communication channels causes the greatest communication effectiveness and efficiency for certain types of tasks. So, successive message transmission in turn determines the versus single message transmission is supposed to be more powerful than a single message. Complementary channel usage versus singular channel usage again adds to the richness of the message transmission, and that in turn determines how effective we perceive our communication technologies to be. Okay. Comparison of human-human interaction and human technology interaction. The first one here is the source of information, computer versus human. The social responses to computer technology are source of information influences the social responses to computer technology. Male voiced computers are perceived to be more proficient in technical subjects than female voiced ones. I don't know, this is based on a research. I don't know why this is so, but for some reason this has been found through research. These are some examples. People respond more positively to computers with personalities that match their own. This is linked to lesson 1. The level of similarity helps us draw the same interpretation or similar interpretations. Level of comfort is higher. So, the more familiar we feel about the personality of the computer, when we are using the computer, we say, oh great, the response coming out of the computer is similar to the manner in which I would have responded. So, this computer is an extension of me. I like this computer. So, we start looking at the computer as a human being. Flattery effects. Participants rated the computer and their own performance more positively when the computer produced praise. This sounds completely, it sounds very funny, but really what is the computer? It is GIGO. This is something I'd heard, you may laugh, garbage in, garbage out. Somebody has fed these things into the computer, so you are essentially aligning yourself with the personality of the person who has programmed the computer in a manner so as to give you these desirable responses. And we, instead of thinking about it like that, what do we say? We say, this is the computer, I like the computer has a personality like mine, computer praises me, or the message that is coming to me is favorable, so I feel good about what I have said and I feel good about myself. And again, this is all through research. I will give you these references, you can look them up. Very interesting reading. Okay, computer as medium, we talked about computer as source. Intermedia comparisons, again another thing. These are, when we say comparison, we are essentially talking about the similarities and the differences. Sometimes in some areas there are similarities, in some areas there are differences. Nature uses, and again this is based on Marshall McLuhan's Medium is the Message in Lee and Sundar 2010. Nature, uses and effects of content are fundamentally shaped by the medium via which the content is experienced. The medium that we use to send the content determines how we use a message, how we do things, how we interpret the message, what we think the sender of the message wants us to do, and so on and so forth. And we make these comparisons based on the use. We use the medium for information, entertainment, or social support for both extroverts and introverts. You want to be, you're shy, you're scared about talking to people, you want to talk to people but you're scared. So what do? You just go online, put something up, nobody knows, anonymously, nobody knows what you're doing, and you're fine. Extroverts, you go in, you declare who you are, you garner all the support, again you're the hub of, or you become the main attraction of any online party. And so it provides a medium of expression to both. It gives you a medium, a manner, a place for social support for both types of people. And similar, this happens again in human to human interaction also. We get information from some people, so you know, this is similar to mass media that are managed by human beings and that are where human beings are the channel of communication. Okay. Credibility, function of volume of use of medium. Again, how much we use a particular medium is gives us a sense of how credible the medium is and how credible we are perceived to be on the medium. Surface design aspect, again research has proven that people don't necessarily verify the information, they just go by surface design most often. And depending on how the website is designed, they figure out whether they should trust the information or not. Credibility markers are another ones. Seals and ratings, you design the website properly, you say this has been verified by X, Y and Z, and or so and so endorses our website or our product or our service, and we just go by that and we think that it is credible. Cognitive effects, print ads are remembered better than web ads. Again, there's a research, I wish I could give you the details, we are just running out of time. Linear site designs promote factual learning, whereas non-linear site designs involving hyperlinks led to better structuring of acquired information, because the nature of their organization triggers the kind of information processing that mimics the associative nature of the human memory system. I'll show you where I've got this information from. I've got the book with me. Now, again, this is based on research. It's linear information gives us factual learning, but when we immerse ourselves in a communication experience, we have hyperlinks taking us from one end to another, as and when we sort of integrate all this information and structure it the way we would structure it in our minds and understand it conceptually. Okay, variable centered approach, studying the role of various attributes rather than human technology interaction as a whole. One is multimedia, transmission of information in a single modality versus simultaneous transmission through several modalities. Again, multimedia does something that human interaction can probably never do, or we could do it. I could be talking, I could be writing things, I could be transmitting, but it's impossible, virtually impossible for a human being to do these different things. We say we are multitasking, no, there's a fraction of a second between different tasks that we do, but we could be doing similar things. But the technology really facilitates a lot of modalities, the transmission of a message through several modalities at the same time that face-to-face interaction cannot do. Interactivity, user to user versus user to system versus user to documents. Again, different classifications have been provided. The second one is functional interactivity. You call up various functions on a site, you download something, you move from one site to another. All these things are happening at the same time. Versus contingent interactivity, threading up of messages, for example, in a bulletin board. You start with one thread and sort of you move on as and when the need arises. This is something that human beings cannot really do. Interactivity as a product versus interactivity as a process. Again, lots of research going on. Is interactivity really a product, or is it a process that the machine helps you engage in? Manipulation, psychological effects of interactivity. What happens when you use an interactive computer mediated technology? The first one here is manipulation check. You can be identified. It's not totally anonymous. It could affect your credibility. You don't know who might be watching what you're doing, so people don't tend to engage, and plus it doesn't promote manipulation. That is one. The second one is induction of a sense of telepresence. Induction of a sense of telepresence, where we say that I have a presence on the internet, people are seeing me, I have a web presence, and that this somehow gives me a sense of web presence. Need for orientation, it helps me orient myself to the matter at hand, because I have to put it up there and people are going to be seeing it, and focus is induced. Interactive devices on a site such as clicks and drags tend to trigger conscious processing of stimuli. Where do I click, where do I drag information? This is similar to the manner in which we organize the stimuli in our minds to understand different concepts. Higher interactivity can lead to, there are several effects that have been discussed, positive and negative effects. Let's look at the negative effects first. Research has pointed towards distraction, disorientation, cognitive overload, frustration, high expectations, etc. These are some of the negative effects, and you can add to the list isolation, all of these things. High levels, on the other hand, positive effects are high levels of engagement, high levels of interactivity encourages high levels of engagement, which thereby force central processing and hence close scrutiny of content and critical thinking and growth, intellectual growth. So again, depends on what you use. Now, what are the implications of these things? I've not really put them down here, but I would like you to think about the implications of these things. We've talked ad nauseum about these things. I would like you to think about the implications of whatever we have discussed in the international business arena. Where do you think all this information would be applied? Where would you apply all this? Which fields of any business would you apply all this information to? I can give you some examples. When we talk about communication, it could apply to superior subordinate communication. It could apply to the organizational climate in an organization. It could also apply very, very highly to or very, very much to the offshore teams that we have. It could apply to the intra-organizational communication. It could apply to the inter-organizational communication across the borders also. It could apply to your teleconferences with your clients sitting in different countries. It could apply to the manner in which you design advertisements. It could apply to the manner in which you communicate with or in which you provide support to people sitting in a different country. It could apply to your international conferences. It could apply to trade shows. It could apply to so many, or marketing, or it could apply to so many different aspects of international business. It just might be worth your while to make a list of these things and see how strong an impact technology has on different aspects of the business. I had made a whole set of slides on how to design presentations and what to do with blogs and all, but I think all this will become outdated by the time this is viewed and used. So it doesn't really make sense to include all of that stuff here. Now what I'll do is I'll give you some more things to think about. Please figure out what technology mediated communication is. Computer mediated communication is okay. More overarching would be technology mediated communication. The other thing I want you to figure out is how may technology mediated communication be influenced by nationality, educational background, professional experience, cultural background, and language. How would you choose which technology to use based on the differences in these things? What are the benefits and limitations of technology mediated communication in international business? Where do you draw the line? And how are these uses influenced by communication rules? How would communication rules play out when you use different kinds of technologies? Where would you become more formal? Where would you become more hierarchical? How would you communicate with different partners and why? Think about these things and we will discuss a different aspect of communication in international business the next time. And my time is up. So please discuss these things and please take these links and explore as much as possible. And we'll talk some more next time. Thank you.